This is Dimitri Lascaris reporting for the Real News Network from Paris, France, and the United Nations COP21 Climate Conference. Today, Monday, December 7th, is the first day of high-level negotiations involving environment ministers and other senior government officials from around the world. These negotiations have been preceded by a week of technical, often laborious negotiations that were intended to narrow the issues for high-level officials taking place this week. However, as the officials were converging on Paris this weekend, a summit of a different nature was taking place just outside the eastern end of Paris in a working-class neighborhood called Montreuil. This summit was the People's Climate Summit. And on Saturday night, hundreds of participants in that summit assembled in a meeting hall in Montreuil to witness the public trial of the world's largest publicly traded oil and gas company, Exxon-Mobil. This trial was precipitated by the investigative journalism of David Hassemeyer, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who, with a number of his colleagues, examined over an 8-month period efforts over a period of decades by ExxonMobil to bury the work of its own scientists, showing that the planet was warming due to greenhouse gas emissions from human activity and that the warming of the planet posed severe risks for the future of humanity. According to the investigation, not only was that knowledge buried by ExxonMobil, but the company proceeded over a significant period of time to fund climate change denialist organizations in order to sow doubt about the validity of climate science, much the same as the tobacco industry had sowed doubt about the causal link between cancer and smoking tobacco years earlier. The journalism of David Hassemeyer and his colleagues appears also to have precipitated an investigation by the New York State Attorney General Eric Schneiderman into these same activities by ExxonMobil. Mr. Schneiderman is reported to have issued a subpoena to ExxonMobil several weeks ago for the purpose of gathering evidence looking at these very activities. Now, this is not necessarily a cause for great hope for the climate activist community, because Mr. Schneiderman's office conducted a similar investigation and concluded that investigation several months ago into the world's largest publicly traded coal company, Peabody Energy. But rather than impose a criminal penalty after finding, as his office stated that it did, that Peabody Energy had misled the public about climate risk, all that was required of the company by Mr. Schneiderman's office was that it improve modestly its disclosure to investors relating to climate risk. Therefore, the public trial in Montreuil proceeded on Saturday night. The panel of 3 judges was comprised of climate activist Clayton Thomas Mueller, climate activist Milan Luc, who is the daughter of the president of the Marshall Islands, which is confronting an existential threat due to sea level rise, and the actor Peter Sarsgaard. The 3-judge panel heard from the prosecutors Naomi Klein and Bill McKibben and approximately 10 witnesses, which included a medical expert, a glaciologist, members of frontline communities, and other investigative journalists. And we're going to take a look at what the testimony of these witnesses was and the judgment of the court. And we're going to begin with the testimony of glaciologist Jason Box. Here's some of what he had to say.
Your Honors, if it's all right, we will stay with this theme of the far north for a moment, but switch to the science side of this equation. We'd like to call Jason Box. Mr. Box, could you describe your work, please?
I'm a climatologist and glaciologist. We've been installing and maintaining a network of measurements on the surface of the Greenland ice sheet the last 20 years. And part of our work is to publish articles, so I've managed to be involved with about 90 externally reviewed scientific articles and contributed to the last 2 intergovernmental panel on climate change reports.
And you've lectured for a decade at various universities on climate change. What universities?
I was a university professor at The Ohio State University teaching environmental science and climatology.
And how many years, summer seasons, have you spent on Greenland?
I've been camping on Greenland for more than the last 20 years. So I've added up more than a year camping on ice. And we have a network of 40 stations distributed across the entire Greenland ice sheet.
In the broadest terms, what's now happening on Greenland?
Greenland is losing ice at an accelerating rate. there's been a kind of a surge in temperatures, and ice sheets are threshold systems. They're either in balance or out of balance, and we've seen Greenland growing in the Little Ice Age that ended as recently as 1900, and since then the ice sheet is decanting into the sea, equivalent to almost a millimeter per year in big melt years like 2012.
A millimeter of sea level rise.
Yeah, global sea level rise. Yeah.
In the course of this century now, what's the potential loss of ice in terms of sea level rise from Greenland?
One way to think about the future that we're faced with is that unfortunately we're committed to about 1 meter of global sea level rise, and we could have several meters more. And that depends on policies. The science is telling us that depending which path we follow, that we can see significant differences. So it's true Greenland ice sheet is beyond its threshold right now, but it's really how far beyond the threshold it gets pushed by warming that just determines how quickly sea level rise. So mitigation matters.
It's your understanding that the same thing is happening with ice elsewhere around the world?
Yeah, the story from Antarctica is more alarming because there's 9 times more volume of ice on Antarctica, and there are a number of processes linked with ocean warming that are reinforcing in ways that multiply the response of the ice sheet. Just a few days ago, we learned of a new mechanism that the increased discharge of ice as glaciers are accelerating introduces a freshwater layer at the surface of the oceans that prevents the warm waters to radiate to space. And so that heat accumulates underwater and is undercutting the Antarctic ice sheet. This is kind of another surprise factor that can produce a very fast response of a large ice sheet to abrupt climate change.
Hello, I'm Matt Powell. Follow-up questions. You said that mitigation matters, and you indicated also that you had read some of the Exxon disclosures. Is that right? I'd like to show you one of the Exxon disclosures. This is a June 6, 1978 document. Is that one of the documents that you recently reviewed from Inside Climate News?
Yes, I'm halfway through the Inside Climate News report. It's fantastically fascinating reading because it's a historical account of kind of a corporation that went rogue.
And describe what you mean by went rogue.
Well, they initially had a transparent, hardcore science profile. They were doing some of the best science in the discipline. And they then defunded those programs and then started to actively fund disinformation campaigns to perpetuate their profitability, knowing that the true cost accounting of their products would lead to some of their own scientists are concluding failed agricultural systems, drought, sea level rise, climate chaos. They knew that, but they went ahead and for short-term gain to lie to the global public, and we will be paying for that for decades to come.
We're now going to hear from Ken Henshaw of Social Action Nigeria. He told the panel of judges at the public trial of Exxon, in a broad-ranging and often moving testimony, of the devastating effects on the Nigerian people of both climate change and the activities of the oil industry in his country.
Thank you very much for joining us here today. Could you tell us your name and your work, please?
My name is Ken Henshaw. I work with an NGO called Social Action in Nigeria. I'm an environmental rights campaigner.
Nigeria is a country rich in oil.
Yes.
Has that made it a country rich and prosperous for all its citizens?
Absolutely not.
Can you explain how that's possible?
Well, Nigeria used to be, until recently, it was something close to the 6th largest exporter of crude oil in the world. And the only people who have made wealth, who have become prosperous due to Nigeria's oil industry, have been a clique of politicians and oil companies.
Surely that can't be true. I'm looking at the ExxonMobil Nigeria homepage right now. And they say, we believe maximizing energy resources goes beyond energy production. Developing human capital through education builds a foundation that transforms the future. In your experience, has that been Exxon's work in Nigeria?
Absolutely untrue. I mean, I'm sure that the majority of people who live in the Niger Delta in Nigeria have never read that thing they have up there. They will probably pull down the website. Now, Ogoni land is a land in the Niger Delta that oil has been extracted non-stop for over 50 years. It is one of the poorest communities in the entire country. The environment in that place has been terribly devastated and polluted. Livelihood sources have been compromised. The people are principally fishermen and farmers. The farms no longer yield. The waters have been so polluted that the rivers are basically dead rivers. I don't know if you've ever seen a dead river. Fishes can't live there, crabs can't live there, nothing lives there. And this was what Sarah was protesting. And he mobilized his people. Series of actions were carried out. And the oil companies, specifically Shell, felt that he had threatened the interests of the company. At a point, oil exploration had basically stopped in Ogoni land. They had stopped drilling oil in Ogoni land. And for that, the military dictatorship in Nigeria had to hang him.
Africa is sometimes described as the continent suffering most dramatically so far from the effects of climate change. Have you begun to see those effects in parts of Nigeria as temperatures rise?
Yes, we have.
Can you describe them for us, please?
Well, in the Niger Delta where I live in 2012, there was massive flooding in the Niger Delta. Sea levels rose by close to 15 meters or thereabout. Houses were completely submerged. An entire farming season disappeared.
People were unable to plant.
Absolutely not. I mean, even those who had planted waiting for harvest, everything got washed off completely washed off. Sea levels rose. People left their houses.
Because the rain had been so intense.
The rain became very, very intense. And surprisingly, the sea levels, the Niger Delta borders around the Atlantic, sea levels basically started rising. And people were surprised. I interviewed a 72-year-old man who said that in his lifetime, he had never seen anything like that. He had never seen it. And of course, also, I'm sure maybe you may be aware that in the news, Nigeria is now called a terrorist country due to the Boko Haram insurgency. Now, Boko Haram exists in a region in Nigeria that is not known for fundamentalism in the least. But that region also happens to be around the area bordering the Lake Chad. The Lake Chad in the last 30 years has shrunk to a 20th of its size. That lake used to be the source of irrigation for the entire region. That lake used to be where livestock drink. That lake used to support farming. That lake was the hub of fishing in the entire region. As the Lake Chad shrunk, people became desperate. People became destitute. People became criminalized. Insurgency rose, fundamentalism rose because it was easy to recruit. So yes, we trace directly the rise of Boko Haram to factors related to climate change.
Thank you very, very much for your testimony.
Thank you so much.
Excuse me, one follow-up from there.
Thank you. So Rex Tillerson, the CEO in 2012, said that humans have always adapted, will adapt. One of the ways that humans adapt is by moving, by migrating. Based on what you're seeing of the treatment of refugees in Europe and North America, do you believe that if Africans are forced to migrate because of climate change, that they will be welcomed?
It doesn't feel so, no. To me right now, it does not feel so. It doesn't feel so at all. I don't get the impression that if, for any reason, people in the Niger Delta in Nigeria who are affected by climate change had to move, they'll be welcome. Here in Europe, no, I don't think so.
What do you feel when you hear those words from Exxon's CEO?
I really feel bad because it seems to me that they don't take into consideration what people are passing through, and the revelations are becoming more and more dire. I can tell you about a community called Bodo in Ogoni land. It is the place where UNEP carried out an assessment of the environment, and it was confirmed that benzene, I'd never heard the word benzene before now, that benzene, a cancer-causing agent, is in the water people drink 900 times higher than it should be. People still drink that water now. It is the water I learned how to swim in. It is the water I drink till now. Life expectancy in the Niger Delta has drastically, dropped. The expectancy level is something between 43 and 46 years old in Niger Delta. If you drive into Bodo every weekend, the pastime there now are burials. What you see on each and every wall are posters announcing this burial or that burial or this burial. And every poster has got the age of the person, the deceased. It's hardly up to 50 years old. I am really, really scared because I still drink that water. On the 1st of August, I was 39 years old. If life expectancy is between 43 and 46, I'm afraid. I'm really getting scared.
Thank you for your testimony.
In the second segment of our report on the public trial of Exxon in Paris, France during COP21, we're going to hear from another witness, Dr. Sandra Steinbreger, who is a biologist who has studied in particular the effects of the fracking industry on the public. And then we're going to hear summations from the prosecutors, Bill McKibben and Naomi Klein, followed by the oral judgment of the court. Reporting from Paris, France, for The Real News, this is Dimitri Lascaris.